Good morning, everyone. Gonna try something a little different again today. We're gonna see if we can do an audio only stream this morning. Um, so hopefully we get some little better upload speed and whatnot, just without the videos on there. Got a picture of Nancy and myself with our horses in the background. For those of you that can see the pictures online, for those of you that are just joining in over the phone, it's good to have you with us. Yeah, let me know in the comments if you're with us this morning. I see we've got some people that have tuned in already. So yeah, it's a little odd because usually I'm so used to talking to people, but instead, um, I get to talk to uh, a camera and a computer screen. It's not quite the same thing. Um, Anyways, we'll get into our message here pretty soon. Just bringing up some notes here for myself, and we'll get started here. Today is Palm Sunday, and for those of you that may not know much about it, this is the day that Jesus rode in on a donkey into Jerusalem, where he, um, well, that was kind of his last days um, with his disciples, and and amidst everything that we're still dealing with, this pandemic, trying to figure out something that's maybe ordinary, outside of the ordinary. Yeah, I think there's a lot of us that are still trying to navigate. For some people, some of you are more introverts, have a little better time with this. It's just another day for you, perhaps, if you can just settle in and do the things you normally do. For some of us who enjoy being around people, spending time with others and whatnot, it's yeah, it's odd. It's an odd adjustment. Hopefully, with through God's will and the efforts that are put forward by our leaders, by our governments, by all those people that are in charge of everything, that we'll be able to be past this in good time. So um, this message today, for those of you who got Bibles with you, it's from Mark's Gospel, chapter 7, beginning in verse 24, and we'll read up to verse 30. And this is kind of reflects something outside the usual, and something that we may be experiencing today. It's a faith that is not maybe normally seen, and I want to especially for you to think about this today. I know I've had some conversations with people in the past where they have a hard time understanding God's grace and how it works. And if you're not a good person, if you will, your entire life, then how do you stay in God's grace? Well, this is a perfect example of what God's grace is like. What having faith that is beyond beyond the usual, that's in our own situation right now, something that is out of the ordinary. Um, this, I think, will help us through this next little bit, and that we'll be able to um, be able to kind of navigate through this time that we're in, to be able to find out that there is actually there is some hope. There's a lot more out there for us than what we just see in front of us, and the weight of everything doesn't need to be on our shoulders continually, all ourselves. So, like I say, if you've got a Bible, if you've got a digital device that has scripture on it, then let's go to Mark's Gospel, chapter 7, beginning in verse 24. And I'm reading out of the New King James Version Bible. It starts off, from there he, being Jesus, arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and wanted no one to know it, but he could not be hidden. For a woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. Then he said to her, for this saying, go your way. The demon has gone out of your daughter. And when she had come to her house, she found the demon gone out and her daughter lying on the bed. Like I mentioned before, here we are trying to navigate our way through the world, not only in the situation right now, through this pandemic, through COVID-19, but also in the way that we try to stay connected with each other. This, as I mentioned earlier, for those of you that are just tuning in, we're trying an audio only stream this morning. We've got trouble with doing video, and hopefully we get a better response. I will be recording this message and uploading it to YouTube later on for those of you that want to get the visual with it also. Nothing too exciting, it's just my face and a china cabinet behind me, but we're doing this from home. So hopefully, like I say, that it comes through. So that we've got all kinds of things that are stressing us right now. And as I was looking through this next series in Mark's Gospel that we've been going through over the last little while within our own church, I was immediately taken by the passage and its purpose as it applies today. It's something that you can honestly see God working within the church, even though the church is not gathered together. But we can still come together in this place, where we're connected through the media that we have available to us today. And so as we read that Jesus is having this encounter with a Gentile woman, and of course the term Gentile means anything. It's a generic term for someone or anyone who wasn't a Jew in the first century. So there's nothing too unusual about this encounter, or there's nothing particularly odd about it, about the situation, since Greeks and Jews lived in the same area by this time in history. So it's quite often that they came together, would have conversations, and so nothing too strange about what was going on. But as the text tells us, Jesus went to a place and into a house where he wanted no one to know where he was. Either they've been busy in the region, they wanted him and his disciples to take some time for themselves, but that didn't work. This woman found out about where Jesus was, and she comes to him. She's asking Jesus to help her daughter. Now, it's not only apparent that Jesus' work had preceded him, and people, once they knew of his compassion for dealing with those who were themselves dealing with illnesses of some sort, doesn't matter what it was, if it was just well, it could be anything really. We see throughout the Gospels people coming to Jesus for advice, for settling arguments, for healing, for spiritual understanding. There's all kinds of examples throughout the Gospel. And so, as it was recorded earlier in Mark, this woman is similar to another woman that came before her. If we go back just a couple of chapters, there was a woman that had a great amount of faith. And we see that faith once again. at how far it goes. It goes a long way to having her request answered. Not just someone that heard it, but actually having it answered. And so it's in this little conversation that this woman's faith is exposed. And we're going to get into that a little deeper. And we're going to try and understand how much um, how much this woman actually knows, how really the intelligence of what she responds to Jesus in his comments to her. So at first, when I looked at what she said to Jesus and the reply to feeding her daughter in verse 27, where it says, "Let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs." And it's from that very statement that we can actually understand what's happening here. And again, I want you to focus on God's grace in this. I want you to focus on not on the banter back and forth or this particular situation, but in the magnitude of God's grace. And because in our own culture, we could brush this off as just an exchange, as a cultural banter, if you will, between two people in the first century, something like we might have in our own communities or our own cultures, and how often we have come together to one another and, hey, how's it going? Um, it's kind of a there's not a lot of deep meaning in that. You say that to somebody outside of our own Western culture, and it takes on a different context. And so to explore this a little bit, we see in Matthew's gospel actually where he gives us a little more of what the conversation was, which in turn it tells us a bit more about the exchange that they had and how significant it was in that cultural flavor. And we'll explain this a little bit more here. That verse is actually from Matthew 15:24, and Jesus tells the woman in Matthew's gospel that he was sent, or pardon me, he was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So I'll read that again. He was not sent except to the lost sheep of Israel. There is a pastor down in Arlington, Texas, that did a little study on this, and he writes that in New Testament times, most dogs were scavengers. They're known as wild, dirty in every way. So the first century society was not a canine loving. They did not appreciate dogs like we necessarily do today, and to call somebody a dog, that was a terrible insult. So in Jesus' day, the Jews, they often called Gentiles or Greeks or somebody outside of the Jewish community dogs because they were unclean, as it were. If you remember from a couple of weeks ago, we talked about the cleanliness and the rituals that go along with that. And so this question comes to mind then, is what Jesus saying to her, is that an insult then, that when he talks about these little dogs and not letting them eat before the children eat? Well, not exactly, but there is that insinuation from the Jew to the Gentile, and we're going to see how this plays into God's grace in a moment here. And so what this is, this very part here is part of the key to understanding. It is the very unusual word, and I emphasize that unusual word because we get it translated into English for us, so we don't see the use of the words, the nouns, the descriptors, whatever it is that we have in our English versions of Scripture. But from the original text, the word that Jesus uses for dogs, or as far as we can translate from the original text, he uses a form that literally means, or it really means, puppies. And I know that just about everybody loves puppies. So you don't want to see a starving puppy. I mean, that's one of the things that it really really exemplifies when something is going wrong, when the puppies are starving. When you've heard the term, like, it looks like being a puppy that's been beaten. They're cowering, they're afraid, and so there's that little bit of compassion that's built into his statement. But there is it's like a code, if you will, almost a double meaning to the conversation that they are having. And so we want to remember that this woman, obviously she's a mother. She's begging and pleading for Jesus to come and heal her daughter. And Jesus is saying her, just kind of reminding her, you, in this way, if we were to put this into our own Western civilization, in our own Western culture, we would hear the conversation like this when he says that the children should be filled first before you feed the dogs, kind of thing. So Jesus says to her, you know how families eat. First the children eat at the table, and then afterwards their pets, their puppies, they may eat too, in that order. The puppies must not eat food from the table before the children do. So then we're going to jump back to Matthew's account of this incident. And this explains the meaning of this conversation in a way, I think, that will give you a broader view of how God's grace is at work at this time. Jesus said, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. Now, Jesus had concentrated his ministry on Israel for all sorts of reasons. From the Old Testament history, Israel was God's chosen people. And so he came to them first. He was sent to show Israel that he was the fulfillment, if you will, the culmination of all scriptural promises from history, back from the very beginning, from the church fathers, Isaac, Abraham, Jacob, the whole 9 yards, Moses and Aaron, everybody from the beginning. It all comes to this point in time where Jesus sets foot on the scene. And so that fulfillment of all the prophets, priests, all the kings, and all the coming together, even of the temple itself, is that's in Jesus right now. But we're gonna just skip ahead a little bit in his story here. After his crucifixion is when he commands his disciples to go to all the nations. So everything coming up to this point is Jesus Jesus coming to the house of Israel to do what he was brought to do, to have God's people be the ones to go out to all the nations after he has taught them. So then we're going to move back to the story then, where Jesus' words then are not the insult that they may appear to be, saying that these, you don't feed the dogs, or you don't feed the unclean. In some manner is what he's saying, or is what he's not saying actually. But what he's saying to the woman is, please understand that there's an order here, an order in the process that I'm here to accomplish. I'm coming to Israel first, to the Jewish nation. Then the Gentiles, the other nations around the world, will come later. And Paul mentions this also in Romans chapter 1 and verse 16, if you want to make a note of that for yourself, to look at it later and see how Paul addresses the church. And this is where this woman replies to him with this outstanding, it's absolutely an astounding reply, when you understand the context in which they're talking. She says, "Yes, Lord, but even the little dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." So, in other words, what she is really saying is, okay, I understand I am not from Israel. I do not worship the God that the Israelites worship. Therefore, I don't have a place at their table. I accept that. But can you, Jesus, let me have even a morsel or a crumb of what you are offering to Israel? And it's then when Jesus says, "For this saying, go your way. The demon has gone out of your daughter." And she went home and found her daughter, and the demon gone. This is absolutely amazing. First off, that this woman doesn't take offense to Jesus saying, I am, I'm not here for the Gentiles at this point. She doesn't stand on her rights as a human being, if you will. She says, all right, I understand. I might not have a place in your plan right at this moment, at this table, as some refer to it. But she said there's more than enough on that table for everyone, including myself, and I need just a crumb of your grace right now. There are so many people I know that are struggling with the world situation, with what we're living in at this moment. We see, mostly we're connecting through social media. There is a huge lashing out at the faith community right now for holding on to what we know, what we love, and what we believe. We've been told to expect times like this. There are going to be times when the world is bearing down on us. And the sad part of it is that the people that are struggling, those that are dealing with situations in their own lives, they would rather turn away from God's grace, even if they were offered that little crumb from the Lord's table, than accept the fact that we live in a fallen world. There's, of course, the questions come up from all over the place. Why is God letting this happen? I think we can answer that fairly easily. God's exactly where you wanted him. We removed him from a lot of places in our culture. But I want to encourage you at this moment that there is an entire meal just waiting for each and every one of us, not just a crumb that falls on the floor, not even to those that are think themselves unworthy of God's grace. There is nothing that you can do or that you can ever do that will make God love you less. All you have to do is reach out to him and say, okay, take what I am for what I am, and show me what you would have me do. Just in this moment, just for today. Once that happens, this time that we're living in will seem so insignificant. It's beyond me why anyone would want to pass up on the chance to live without being subjected to fear of what's going to happen, fear of the world after we regain some traction from this pandemic? What's it going to look like? I don't think we know. It's interesting that Andy Stanley has been doing weekly Bible studies. For those of you who know who he is, if not, you can look him up on YouTube. But we've been going through almost the exact same passages. We've never talked to each other. I don't even know the guy, but in this time, it's how God's church is coming together in such a way that is stronger than possibly I have ever seen it. In conversations with people in the faith community, they can see God walking in front of them and leading us through this. It's not just something that's imagined or that we just put together out of our daily lives, but this is actually things that are happening. These things are happening. This woman and her faith, she just wanted to be a part of God's greater plan. It's incredible to see that she only asks for that crumb. Even the little dogs, even us, who think that we are so far out of God's grace, are undeserving. Maybe we don't get the full meal deal. But God's not going to ignore us if we ask Him for just a little bit, that little morsel of whatever it is. Maybe one day we will get the chance to ask this woman about that meeting that day when she put her faith forward and saw Jesus, not necessarily as her Savior, but as she now sees Him, as He is her sister in the Father's house. So I'm asking you today, if you're wondering, if you're unsure, what are you waiting for? What do you have to lose in this moment? You don't have to be in a special group to join into God's grace. We can all join in that feast together. And I hope that for today you're able to take some comfort and some of the good news of what God is putting out there. This encounter that Jesus had with this Gentile woman, her faith in knowing what He was capable of and what He is still capable of today, and for that measure of God's grace, how incredible it is, how much bigger it is than any one of us may have ever imagined. Take that to heart today. Stay safe, everyone. Please, if you're able to, we're working as best we can from our homes, from our houses, from our wherever we're closed in. So if you're able to join us, like I say, I will try and have this up on YouTube later on for some of you who join a little later, and we'll hopefully get that posted before this afternoon. I can find it on Woodville Gospel Chapel YouTube page. Thank you again, everyone. Let me know what you think. Put some comments up on our Facebook if you know someone who could benefit from today's message, and by all means, direct them towards it in any way that you can. Thank you again. Stay safe out there, everyone. Bye-bye.